speaker, coach, and accomplished athlete whose life exemplifies resilience and transformation. After surviving a devastating car accident with his entire family, a tragedy that led to over 45 surgeries and numerous additional setbacks, John discovered his purpose, helping others overcome adversity and finding strength in their struggles. Featured in People magazine, Men's Fitness, and on Good Morning America, John blends his personal comeback journey with professional success, including $425 million in real estate sales. From a devastating car accident to tackling Spartan races, John now empowers others to turn setbacks into comebacks.
With his signature keynote, what do you see? Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause for John Ulsh.
So apparently I'm standing between you and lunch, so we'll keep the 15. What do you see when you look at this photo? Maybe you see confidence. Maybe you see success. Maybe you just see a guy who spent too much money on a belt. That's fair. But what you don't see is what you do see is what I want to show you. What about this photo? When you look at this photo, you might see somebody who's strong. You might see somebody who's determined. You definitely see somebody who's a little crazy, right? But what about this? Because this is where the real journey began. The pain, the fight, the reality that shaped everything. The real question is not what you see, it's what you don't see. Because life is not defined by a single moment. It's defined by what happens after. So this is my reality. 18 days in a coma. I woke up in searing pain, all consuming. Stitched from pelvis, or from sternum to pelvis with big blue sutures. Stitches across my pelvis where they put it back together with a titanium plate and 8 screws. A tube running into my left lung where they had to reinflate it because my spleen had ruptured. Diaphragm ruptured. Every rib in my body was broken. I proceeded to go on to have a bed in which I was not able to be moved. Every vertebrae in my back from L1 to L4 was fractured. But what about my family? My wife, our 8-year-old daughter and 4-year-old son were both in the car with me. What happened to them? Where were they? How were they? I'd later go on to find out that they were also very injured in the accident. They were all in the hospital, but by the time I was out of my coma, they were at home recovering. I also found out that a car crossing the center line of a 55-mile undivided highway, no skid marks on the road. The police estimated the impact speed to be 125 miles an hour. The other driver was dead. A week after I came out of my coma, I was moved to a nursing home where I would spend 8 more weeks non-weight bearing, laying in a bed with nothing but fear and pain. I had to come to terms with the fact that I had no control over what happened to us. All I could control was where I was going to go next. 2 years after the accident, I found myself sitting in my chair at my office, my 10-year-old daughter on my lap crying. I miss my old daddy, the one who would play with me. That shattered me more than any broken bone. That was the moment everything changed. That was my why. Now, I still struggled to deal with the fact that I didn't think I'd ever get my life back together. That would I ever be able to have the quality of life that allowed me to hold my children? Would I be the man I was before? After my daughter's statement, I went to rehab, outpatient rehab the next day and quit. I told my therapist that They couldn't push me as hard as I was willing to push myself. And I left and drove straight to the local YMCA, where I started working out with adults with special needs. Now, it was a change. The struggle was still there. I still mentally wasn't prepared to deal with what was going on for our family. But I also knew that the only way forward was for me to continue to push. So the question that most people want to ask is, how? How, John, did you endure 45 surgeries? How did you spend 8 weeks laying on your back? How did you turn around and recover? The first two are pretty easy, because the reality is we never really know what we're capable of until we're forced to have to do it. So the third, that's a lot more complicated. You see, all our lives we've been told to chase the finish line, to check the boxes, to measure success by the outcome. But what if we had it all wrong? I didn't wake up one day with some revelation that said, oh, this is how you're going to change your life. It was built through years of pain, adversity, successes followed by setbacks, and generally just perseverance. Through those lessons, I started to see patterns. Out of those patterns became 8 pillars that I use today to guide my life, to focus on my coaching, to focus on my book. We don't have time today to discuss all 8 of them, so I'm going to focus on one that I think if we embrace this one, everything else seems to go the positive direction that you need it to go. It's the one pillar that when you take it into your life, your successes, your challenges, they have more meaning. Now, I had to fall in love with something that most of us push through as fast as possible to achieve our goals. And that is, I had to learn to fall in love with the process. Now, that story was driven home to me very early in the first month that I started working back at the YMCA by a young man named Danny. Danny has Down syndrome. And Danny was part of a program at the YMCA run by United Cerebral Palsy in which special needs adults are placed with trainers. So the first day I met Danny, Danny was sitting on the first machine of a circuit lifting program. Danny gets up, slides over to the next machine. I get off of my walker, slide comfortably into Danny's seat. It's a chest press. I grab onto both sides, and I push, and it does not budge. I reluctantly reach down, move the pin up 4 spaces, and move. The next machine is the shoulder press. I slide in, I don't even try. I just reach down and move the pin up significantly. Now this goes on through each machine, and when I arrive at the last machine, Danny and his trainer are waiting. Danny looks at me and goes, "What happened to you?" So I slide one arm off of my walker, pull up my sweat-drenched t-shirt, show Danny my scars. I give Danny the short answer. I said, "I got hit by a car." Danny stops and looks at me and says, "That's a poor car." He then proceeds to reach in, pick me up in a bear hug, and literally thought I was going to refracture every rib. Sets me back down, gets about 2 inches from my face, says, "You're going to be good. You just need to be big and strong like me." Then he proceeds to skip backwards, flex into the biceps flows, double crab flows, and skips out of the gym. Now see, Danny loved the gym. Danny loved the people. He loved being there with his fellow gym rats. He was super encouraging. Danny didn't have a goal. Danny was just there for the process of being at the gym. Now, Danny was strong as an ox, but that wasn't his goal. However, it made Danny an excellent hugger. I would continue for over a year working out with Danny and his fellow adults with special needs, learning from them long before I had names for it, how to fall in love with the process. Over time, I started to develop other ways that we could chase this, right? Other ways that we could continue to expand on it. So I created those 8 pillars. The process is the one that I continue to stay the most focused on. So let's talk about how can we embrace the process, right? If you want to be in better shape, you can't simply decide, I'm just going to be a person that's going to lose weight. You've got to be somebody who finds joy in working out, who enjoys tracking and in eating well. If you want to be successful in a business, you can't be that person that's just chasing the next promotion. You actually have to be the person who shows up to work, works hard, is the person who can find joy in learning. If you want to overcome a setback, you can't just be the person who wants their normal life back. You actually have to be the person who's willing to embrace the difficult, sometimes backwards realities of pushing yourself to get better. So let's look at what our options are. First, focus on small wins. I mean, we set a goal, but if you can focus on the small wins, you start to see that the goal isn't the big picture. It's the journey along the way. If you can start to celebrate even the smallest wins, those opportunities then turn into celebrations, and you need to celebrate even the smallest ones. Detaching from the outcome. Set micro goals, right? Shift your focus from goals to improving. When you're constantly focused on the goal, you're losing the most important part, the beautiful part, and that is the process. We need to continue to move the goalposts, not out of frustration, but out of the sheer fact that these goals are continuing to grow. When we constantly find joy in the work versus the result, we start to have something that's special. When we were kids, we wouldn't call climbing trees and riding bicycles and playing pickup sports in the yard work. We called that fun. We need to get back to embracing fun. Working out with like-minded people became fun for me. Writing a book that I'm just finishing became fun. And I will tell you, for a long time it wasn't. Until it became fun, it was something that I couldn't embrace. The job is not to endure, right? Finding joy in the routine. We need to discover that consistent efforts lead to consistent fun. We have the most joy from something when we actually like it. We don't call it work then, right? We call it something that we look forward to. There are so many times during my recovery where all I wanted to do the next day was be able to get to that gym again. And I'd already done it. When I was coaching, I didn't like when I was done. When I would speak, I would be like, why am I finished? When you start to find the pleasure in it, then you don't want that to end. So I ask you, what process in your life have you been resisting? Maybe it's a work-related thing. Maybe it's fitness. Maybe it's a relationship that needs to be rebuilt. What's the one thing you could do today to embrace it? See, the process isn't the thing standing in your way. It actually is the way. I promise you, if you can find joy in the process, then you will also be able to find the meaning in everything that you do. Thank you.
All right. Put your hands together for John. Amazing.
Amazing, John.
Good
Thank
job,
you so
good
much.
job, John. I think I need to up my fitness activities. Looking at him, a little jealous.
Yeah.
A little jealous.